Good morning, everyone. My name is Jennifer Gordon, and I'm the director of the Atlantic Council's Nuclear Energy Policy Initiative. And for today's episode of Innovation Stream, we are so fortunate to be here with Stefano Buono, who is the Chief Executive Officer of NewCleo, an Italian nuclear company. Stefano, I'm so delighted to turn the floor over to you to tell us a little bit more about NewCleo.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. Welcome, everyone. So NewCleo is a company that is developing the so-called small modular reactor or advanced modular reactor. And it's actually developing a new generation of this reactor, what is normally called the fourth generation of nuclear reactors. Personally, I have been working on this subject since the 90s. And for a long time, I abandoned this field because for many years it was very difficult to move from let's say, the design to realizing a real reactor. And but now we live in a completely different moment of our history. We really need nuclear energy for two main reasons. The first one is, of course, decarbonizing energy production. The second reason is possibly a little bit more related to Europe. We have experienced in the past 2 years a real need of energy independence, an energy crisis, and this has been essentially caused by the invasion of Russia of Ukraine. And so realizing that Europe was too much depending on gas. So now there are two reasons for a European company to relaunch the idea of nuclear. So I was very happy that after having founded a nuclear medicine company, now I'm engaged again in the nuclear business. So NewCleo has only a couple of years of existence. So our research started in '94, but actually I founded the company only 2 years ago. But in only 2 years, we grew to more than 650 people. We have a lot of patents. We are actually more of a European company than an Italian company because we are based in France, in Italy, in Switzerland, and in UK. And the characteristic of NewCleo is first to use a technology which is very different from any reactor that has been built today in the civil nuclear industry, which is the use of lead, liquid lead as a coolant. Why liquid lead? Because we found since the 90s the possibility of building passive safety using liquid lead. So reactors that cannot have accidents that are destructive, like the accidents of the nuclear of the past. On the contrary, if anything happened to this reactor, they switch off without any destruction, so any destructive accident. This is called passive safety. Even without human intervention, the physics stop the reactor. And this is very easy to achieve with lead. And another reason for using lead, the second reason, is to reduce the cost. This one of the big problems of the nuclear is also the cost. The nuclear has not been competitive with fossil fuels at all in the past. And that's possibly the main reason why for so many years nuclear has not really expanded. While, of course, we have seen an incredible growth of the fossil fuel that has led to climate problems. So using lead again gives you the possibility to build very compact reactor, to make it very small, and this traduces into make very safe reactors. But there is a third reason to use lead. The physics inside the reactor is slightly different. You build with lead a so-called fast reactor. The physics makes that you produce much less nuclear waste. And today, actually, we could use the nuclear waste that is been produced by the nuclear industry in the past 8 years as fuel. So there is still a lot of energy in the nuclear waste today. We extracted only less than 0.5% of the energy of the uranium that has been extracted in the mines. Using lead and with the strategy of recycling, multi-recycling the nuclear waste, we can actually extract 200 times more energy from this material that has been already extracted. And this is very important because today we have a different sensitivity versus the environment. So the idea of a circular economy, even considering the fuel that we use, the uranium is very important. Imagine that France has 2,000 years of free electricity if we would use all of the energy that is inside the waste that is currently already on the French territory. So this gives you an idea on how much material we can still use if we approach the production of nuclear energy with multi-recycling the waste. And what is very important is what is remaining is just uranium or heavier elements that is broken, so as the so-called fission fragments. And the quantity of waste is really very, very little. The nuclear reaction is very concentrated, is 1 million times more concentrated than any chemical reaction, and this relates very much also to the waste that you produce. 1 gigawatt electric, that is the electricity needed by a big town in Italy like Rome, the capital, produce only less than 900 kilograms of this waste per year. And this is less than a cubic meter. Is really a very small quantity, a quantity that after 250 years comes back to the original radioactivity of the material that we extracted from Earth. So for the first time, if you consider the possibility of a full recycling, of a multi-recycling of this material, you can really achieve a nuclear industry that is almost waste-free. So that's very important. That's the big importance of our mission today in Europe. So what is the size of our reactors? We are making reactors that are more or less 6 meters by 6 meters in size, but they produce 200 megawatt electric of energy, so very concentrated. The technology is very connected with the experience of France, because France developed in the past fast reactors, but they were using sodium rather than lead, so a different liquid metal. Sodium has a chemical risk. So to control the chemical risk of sodium is a bit like lithium for the lithium batteries. You can get fire if the sodium gets in contact with air, or even explosion if it gets in contact with water. So there is a chemical risk, and you have to control the chemical risk. This made the sodium reactors a bit expensive, much more expensive than the current reactor. So that was the reason why essentially the technology didn't really develop in the world. But one of the leading countries was France. We built a few sodium reactors. We have this experience, so the moving to lead has been quite simple for the know-how that was present in France. And this is why we are building our first reactor. We are engaged already with the regulatory authorities of France to be able to build our first reactor by 2031 in France. Part of the technology of liquid lead has been developed also by Italy, and that's the reason why we are building the so-called precursor, so a non-nuclear reactor that will test and qualify all the components of the reactor by 2026. So only slightly more than 2 years from now, we have this full machine up to the turbine being built in Italy. And we imagine to deploy our fleet of 200 megawatt electric reactors starting from 2033. The small modular reactors are very important, not only because we are trying to make less electrical energy with less cost, but also because we can combine the use of heat and electricity in industrial production. And I think this is a very important mission because we can contribute to electrification of the energy production, but we can do some work that, for example, renewable cannot really do. That is to provide electricity and heat at the same time. Today, there is a big part of the industry that needs a combination of electricity and heat. If we try to use the renewable, that's very complicated for the industry because if they connect a renewable system, the capacity factor of the system is not 100%, so they would need also storage. But even if they invest in the system, if the industry invests in the storage, they still need the heat, and the producing heat from the electricity is also another expense. So essentially, the small modular reactor can help decarbonize not only because of their electricity production, but also because they can really substitute gas into the industrial system that needs at the same time huge quantity of electricity and huge quantity of heat. So that's our mission, innovation. We are probably one of the few startups that has a significant funding because in these 2 years we were able to expand so much because we have raised 400 million euros. Certainly the most funded startup in the nuclear system in Europe, not so in the US. In the US, we saw many startups starting much earlier than 2021, which is the date we started. But I can say that in Europe, the ecosystem is moving very much. We see more and more of these companies, and we hope that collectively we can contribute to the decarbonization of Europe and contribute, of course, to the decarbonization of the energy system of the future. So that is nuclear in a nutshell. Thank you for this opportunity to present what we are doing.
Stefano, thank you so much for that fantastic overview. There are a number of points that you made in your presentation that I would like to pick up on, starting with, I think, going back to the beginning of your talk. Tell us a little bit more about some of the differences between siting considerations and also the capital costs of the SMRs, the small modular reactors that you're talking about, relative to the traditional large light water reactor fleet.
Yes, well, the first thing is that they can more easily work with the industry. Of course, you cannot build a very huge system to serve an industrial district. You need to have this passive safety. You don't have exclusion zone, or you don't have an evacuation plan if you implement this passive safety. But I must say that the very interesting part is the possible contribution of private funding for nuclear systems. So we are looking at a transition between a traditional nuclear industry that is made of a governmental fund into what can be funded by the private. And if you think about an example in Europe of a big nuclear reactor, these are projects that can last up to 10 years. In the making, and where the capital that is blocked can be even up to 30 billions. We have seen this kind of budget very often in Europe. We want to go with small modular reactors in a situation in which a reactor is built in 3 years. Because they are small, they're simple, they're like big ships. Why you should build a big ship in 3 years that is even more complicated than a small reactor, and you shouldn't be able to do the same with the reactor. If you have a small capital investment, let's take one of our reactors, 800 million for 200 megawatt electric, and you use this money over the 3 years of the construction. At the end, the internal rate of return of your investment makes sense, much more than with the nuclear in the past. So we are living also a transition between big and small that is opening to the possibility of significant funding, private funding, into the nuclear industry, and this will significantly help the decarbonization.
Stefano, thank you so much. I want to keep going on this thread because I think it's really fascinating. And I know that in just a few days, we will be at the G7 Energy Ministerial in Torino, and we'll have more of this conversation. But you mentioned the role of the private sector, and you've raised a tremendous amount of private funding for NewCleo. And in the United States, we talk also a lot about public-private partnerships. So what is the role of the private sector in nuclear project finance, but also what's your vision for how government and the private sector ought to be working together on nuclear funding?
I think we are learning how to work together because we don't know yet how to do it. We are a little bit like the space industry at the very beginning of the adventure of the space industry. That was again very governmental driven, and so the role of nuclear had to be carved out a little bit at the time. Of course, there are many concerns about public acceptance, safety, safeguards, and security of nuclear systems. So all these have to speak. So, and I think that's the challenge. I think that from the economical point of view, the private sector will understand that nuclear is an opportunity for investment and for contributing to the planet through the decarbonization, a more sustainable way to produce energy. So this is not under discussion. We have to be sure that the public will enable this transition. So that's the challenge. It's a question of authorization of policies, of a lot of things that have to contribute to that. But I'm very confident that this is happening and will be happening faster and faster.
Stefano, thank you. Where do you see the most demand coming from right now? In which countries, which regions of the world for next generation reactors?
Well, it's interesting because when I started the company 2 years ago, there were 32 new countries that wanted to enter into nuclear. Now there are 50 in only 2 years. So there is clearly an interest from a very large number of countries worldwide to enter into nuclear activity because of the understanding of a need of this decarbonized base load. So it's less of a question for the rest of Europe of energy independence, more on the decarbonization and the opportunity of nuclear. But if we see Europe, I mentioned there has been this added need of energy independence that have accelerated the interest of many European countries. So there are many European countries that are returning to nuclear. The first one was even France. France is the most nuclearized company in the world, possibly because at a certain moment, 78% of the electricity production in France was made out of nuclear. But in 2012, the government decided on a law to reduce the contribution of nuclear to the energy balance of the country. And only 2 years ago, President Macron decided to reverse this trend, to abolish this law, and to order the build of 6 new reactors. So just to reverse this. And we see this reversal almost everywhere in Europe. I've seen a strong U-turn made by Sweden, by Holland. Belgium is in the process. Italy is in the process. So I would say that the return of nuclear is so strong that we can talk about a renaissance of nuclear completely, and possibly is the final one. Because we had some opportunity to develop this technology in the past that has been hampered by many factors. Now is really the moment in which I think we will finally embrace the technology everywhere in the world.
Will Germany also make a U-turn?
Yes, I think so. At the moment, Germany has been really penalized by the uh, the policy on electricity, on energy of because they were the most depending on Russian gas. Today, unfortunately, Germany is the place where you pay more the electricity, and that is polluting more if we see the CO2 emission in Europe. So it's a very unfortunate situation. I believe that there is already some willingness that is inside the country, and possibly the next governments may be more um, take more care about the willingness of the people that is more and more turning toward the interest into nuclear, especially starting from the younger generation. If I say a country like Italy that abandoned nuclear by closing 4 existing nuclear power plants immediately in '87, so very possibly the most determined action against nuclear in all over the world, because Germany didn't close their nuclear power plant in '87 after the Chernobyl accident. So even in Italy, 2/3 of the younger generation, the youngest, are in favor of nuclear. So a non-nuclear country in which big majority of the younger population wants nuclear. This is a real sign of what's happening today.
Absolutely. So you mentioned a plan to build these reactors in Italy, but also I think you mentioned that you're going through the licensing application process right now in France. Can you say a little bit more about that process, and if you're also planning to apply for a license in Italy as well?
Yes, we initiated our process in France because our first of a kind will be in France, and very soon after the summer we'll be starting a licensing from 2 more countries for our first commercial unit, Slovakia and UK. Uh, Italy at the moment has nuclear authorities because we still have 3 reactors that are research reactors, but there is no a perfect framework to apply for a license for a reactor that is producing power. And the government is engaged with the industries, also with us as part of this industry, in order to create again this framework. So when there will be a new possibility for us to apply, and the actual willingness of the government and the population to have nuclear back, we will be ready to do this application. We are ready because we could engage Italy immediately in this parallel process between 3 different countries that we want to engage already in September, but the country has to be ready.
So you said that you are working to bring nuclear back to Italy, and that Italy has not had nuclear since 1987. What are the implications in the current state of the supply chain, educational programs, the workforce? How are you addressing the ecosystem issues of bringing an entire industry back to Italy?
We are very lucky because we have a huge tradition of nuclear, and all of the know-how of Italy has not totally disappeared. Today, there are almost 600 companies in Italy that work in the nuclear industry, but abroad, of course. So they're part of the supply chain to other companies outside of Italy that actually build the reactor. And nuclear has continued the level of the research for both fission and fusion. And our industry is also contributing to the fusion research, which is, technologically very close to nuclear. So, and still there are a lot of nuclear engineers that are graduated. Of course, not enough to fuel the nuclear renaissance. So we need really to boost education in this field. But this is not even a problem only of Italy. France, that has 60 operating nuclear reactors, or 58 to be precise, they have 220,000 people that works in the nuclear industry, and they need to add another 100,000 people. So you see how nice are the forecast of growth of this business, and how important it is now to contribute with the right education, the right human resources to accomplish with this mission. And I think it's a general problem of Europe how to expand the interest in nuclear again.
Absolutely. So we're nearly out of time, but again, I want to come back to the G7 because we are days away from the G7 Energy Ministerial, and as we know, this year is Italy's presidency of the G7. So, in your opinion, what are the implications of Italy's presidency for nuclear?
Hopefully, as I mentioned, the government is considering the opportunity to come back into nuclear. They are, since we have been really absent from nuclear, the general consensus, I must say, that is heading toward the next generation, so the fourth generation, so an innovative nuclear system to bring back into Italy. This has been repeated by the government many times. We are creating the framework for relaunching our nuclear industry on this basis in Italy. The government took part of a European Nuclear Alliance that is one of the initiatives that arrived in Europe to relaunch the nuclear industry. This alliance is made of many member states. Italy started to be an observer, but it looks like that we would like to become a member soon. I hope that this decision will be taken soon by our government, but I think that in line of this trend, Italy is considering to declare their interest also officially within the G7. This is really what I wish to see very soon, in a few days.
Great. Well, I think that's a very exciting note for us to end on. And I look forward to seeing you soon in Torino and to continuing this conversation. And again, Stefano, thank you so much for spending time with us here at the Atlantic Council Innovation Stream.
Thank you very much, and see you in Torino. Thank you.
Thank you.